Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. We've seen obviously a lot of weapon tuning recently, and a lot of things have changed with some of the best weapons in the game, whether it be their shots to kill, their overall TTK, their movement speed, and then also their recoil. Recoil has been something that's been adjusted constantly all throughout the year on a lot of different weapons in Warzone. And as of lately, we've seen a lot of specific recoil adjustments to certain barrels on weapons, or just some weapons in specific in general as well. So today, I wanted to go ahead and break down the top 5 lowest recoil weapons, or easiest to control weapons in Warzone right now, sort of show off what weapons you don't really have to do much with to control them really at any range. So if you enjoyed the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, feel free to do so. That way you can always stay up to date with absolutely everything going on in COD. News, intel, updates, loadouts, tips. It is all right here every single day, and we are on the road to 800K. So the first weapon we've got to talk about is the QBZ. This is one of the easiest weapons to use in the entire game. It's a relatively low recoil rifle. It's great for close range, medium range, long range, and it's sort of like the preferred rifle of Raven for specifically long range engagements. And they've actually said that in recent patch notes. They really wanted to make an emphasis on how the QBZ should be a good medium to long range weapon, because it's not the best damage in the world, but it's got really good control, right? The pattern here is incredibly simple. It's basically a straight vertical pattern, which, yeah, when you don't do any effort to control it, like what I'm doing in these little examples that you'll see throughout the video, that's just me shooting the raw weapon, no control whatsoever. And while it does look like it's bouncing obviously pretty high into the air with that overall pattern, it is straight vertical, meaning all you got to do is pull straight back, and it's going to counter it entirely. You don't have to do any extra work with any horizontal bounces. There's no, RNG to the horizontal bounce in general. It is a very simple and straightforward pattern, and super easy to control, whether you're on keyboard and mouse or if you're on controller, which in turn makes it very accurate and very easy to track players, and in general makes it one of the lowest recoil and best control weapons in the entire game, especially when you go ahead and you build out for the most optimal setup. So first up, we're going for the agency suppressor, which conveniently enough does end up helping with that vertical control, which makes the QBZ even easier. Now, as for pretty much every single long-range Cold War rifle, we're also going for the Task Force barrel, which, lo and behold, also helps out with the vertical and the horizontal control. The horizontal really isn't a huge aspect here, as mentioned, but the vertical help, once again, is going to help smooth things out, as is the Field Agent Grip, which honestly I don't think you absolutely need to use, but in all reality, throwing it on there makes this even better for those, especially like, 70, 80, 90, 100 meter fights. So in that case, why not? Might as well be as accurate as you can. Then I also throw on the 45 round drum. Anything bigger than that is just a bit too slow. And then finally, we go for the 3x optic as well. In personal preference, I like to go ahead and throw on the deep sea reticle. It comes from the Coral Reef Milano bundle. I like it. It's sort of like a makeshift blue dot. Most of you guys know that by now. Now, next up, we've got the PPSH. As an SMG, you're not going to be using this in really anything past like 25, 30 meters. But within that, sort of range there, this thing is a beam. The recoil here is going to be primarily vertical. It does have a little bit of like left and right horizontal movement here and there, but it's really not anything too crazy. It's going to be very similar to the QBZ in the sense that if you're just pulling straight back, it's pretty much going to do all the work necessary. Horizontal recoil is a lot more difficult to control and to predict, hence why you won't see any weapons that have a ton of horizontal movement on this list. Vertical recoil is super simple regardless of the input you're using, and because of that, and because obviously you're in such close range fights with the PPSH, the physical targets that you're aiming on are bigger. In turn, it's going to be easier to track those and trace those and stay on specific parts of the body like the chest, neck, and head, which is the most optimal. And with that pretty minimal recoil, with that small pattern that's very easy to predict and counter, you can consistently land those shots without much effort whatsoever. Again, making the PPSH one of the best low recoil weapons in the entire game. So here we're starting off with the Grew Suppressor yet again. We do get that vertical control, which is a huge bonus there. I also go ahead and rock the Task Force, which does actually hurt the control a little bit, but it's not enough to really drastically make this weapon all that much worse. It doesn't change the pattern. It's just a bit more noticeable. But really, that counter there, that vertical recoil counter, is not difficult whatsoever. I also go for the Tiger Team Spotlight. We don't even use an underbarrel in this case just because the recoil is that simple. We throw on the 71 round drum, and of course, as you guys know, the basic Cold War copy and paste setup, we go for the Raider stock as well. Then when it comes to low recoil, we've got to talk about the Fin. I specifically was really looking forward to talking about this one because it's so unique. We have all these different barrels here, the adverse barrels, which obviously just make the fire rate insane. Without the adverse barrels, the recoil is super easy. Most players will go for the long shot advantage in this case, and it is one of the easiest weapons to use in the entire game. But honestly, you can get away with using the long shot adverse, which, as it says, hurts the recoil control, but because it is such a simple pattern, it is straight vertical, even with the insane fire rate. It really just comes down to pulling down enough to make it so that you're controlling enough for that fire rate to, you know, not overtake the control there too much. It requires a bit more work using the adverse barrel than it would with the long shot advantage, but the TTK increase with the adverse barrel, because that increased fire rate, is just insane and so worth it. And it's definitely the highest, you know, fire rate weapon that has this easy of recoil, in my opinion. And it actually surprisingly has one of the best TTKs in the entire game. So yes, using the adverse is gonna hurt the recoil a little bit more than just the basic long shot advantage, but it's still easy enough that I feel like the Fin in general has to make this list, and it still gets by making this list despite the lower recoil of the adverse barrel, and it just makes it so unique and so fun to use. We of course also going to throw in that monolithic suppressor. Unfortunately, no real control here compared to the GRU and the agency and whatnot, but it's going to be easy enough because we do have that commando foregrip on there. I really wouldn't recommend Ranger or Operator or Merc. They're just not worth it on most rifles. They're going to hurt that movement speed too much. I also go ahead and rock an optic here. Either the blue dot hollow sight or the VOK 3x optic, either or is going to work just fine for that. Then lastly, you could go a few different routes. You could go for something like a 100 round mag if you wanted to. The 100 round belts here are actually pretty solid. You could go for something like a tack laser, make it a bit snappier and more stable over range. Or you could go for something like sleight of hand, get that faster reload off because obviously it's an LMG. You can't really go wrong with any of those in my opinion. These core 4 attachments up first though are the main ones you want to look at, especially that adverse long shot barrel. Now following the Fin, we've got another MW weapon, the MP7. You'll love to see it. We've been talking about the MP7 a lot recently. And again, when it comes to low recoil, this is one you have to bring up because it is, again, a very vertical pattern. Pretty much that's all there is to it. There's, you know, an occasional shot out right or shot out left, but the vertical here is so easy to control because it's just a simple pull back, just like all the other weapons that we've looked at already. And in turn, it makes it great for close range fights and even pretty solid for some medium range fights as well as sort of that hybrid sub. Great for sniper support and super easy to use. The setup here is pretty basic. Monolithic suppressor, like always, nothing new there. We're going for the recon barrel. This does actually end up helping out with the control. I don't use an underbarrel here. If you're going to, I'd recommend Merc, but I don't feel like you need it because, again, that vertical pattern is just so simple. You don't really need to waste an attachment spot on something that you can do by yourself. Instead, we go for the tack laser, get that snappiness on the ADS and better stability over range. I go for the 50 round mags. 60 would also work, but 50 is just a tad bit faster, doesn't bog you down as much. Then I also go for the Icon, the Stippy Grippy, and get a better sprint to fire and also a better ADS out of that as well. And then lastly, we've got the M13. Quite a few Modern Warfare weapons on the list, which, hey, you'll love to see it. The M13 is the one weapon on this list that doesn't have that basic straight vertical pattern. This one is a lot more diagonal up and to the right, which some players will say, okay, that's really not that simple, right? But in all reality, because it is so consistently up and to the right, it makes it incredibly easy to counter. You're just pulling back and to the left a little bit, the opposite of where it's going, and it's gonna look like it has no recoil. Something I always see in my comments from a lot of you guys is, yeah, the M13 is not like that super fast TTK weapon, but it's just so easy to use. That's why I love it. You don't have to work to use this thing over range. And even though the pattern isn't that straight vertical, like I said, it's simple enough that most players can get a hold of it pretty quickly, and they're good to go from there. And when it comes down to it, I mean, this thing is going to be a laser beam. It's great for medium and long range fights, and because that recoil is so low, it's also incredibly easy to stay on target, especially over range, which is something that the M13 really has going for it, despite the lower Modern Warfare weapon mobility and some of the, you know, lacking attachments when it comes to certain things like the lasers or the underbarrels like some of the Cold War weapons have. But for the setup here, we're once again going for the monolithic suppressor. In this case, we go for the marksman barrel because this is the longest option. Helps out with that recoil control as always. We're also going for the commando foregrip, yet again, pretty much the standard on MW rifles, as we all know by now. I personally go for the 50 round mags, just same deal as the MP7. Honestly, 60 is totally sufficient. It's just a bit too heavy for my liking. So I go for the 50 and that works just fine. And then again, for the optic, you can either go for the blue dot hollow sight, which I specifically like a lot on the M13, or you could go for the VOK 3x. It does help out a bit with that, you know, visual recoil, so it'd make it even more of a beam in that sense. But really, you can't go wrong with any optic there. That's more so preference-based. Statistically, though, the M13 is a laser when it comes down to it. That super simple diagonal pattern, as is all these weapons. Honestly, they're so easy to use, so straightforward that you can beam with any of them in any fight you need to use them in. So with all of that being said, those are the top 5 lowest recoil and easiest to use weapons in Warzone right now. That's gonna wrap things up for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, or if you found it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new here or if you have not already subscribed, feel free to do so. That way you can always stay up to date with absolutely everything going on in COD. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I will catch you guys later. Peace out.